Good morning. Good morning. Happy Sunday. I hope you get the chance to fellowship today, as I will, which is lovely. Now, here we are in 1 Samuel 29. And this whole chapter is about what I think of God's intervention in the events surrounding the death of Saul and Jonathan. I can't imagine how David would have reacted if he had gone, as he seemed to plan to at the beginning of this chapter, to be part of the army of the Philistines that were mustered against Saul and his army. Saul had been to this medium in the previous chapter, and she had brought Samuel. Samuel had appeared and told Saul that he would die in the battle that was to come. And he was afraid, and then he took food, and then he went with his men out to battle. And the Philistines were all gathered, and David and his men were with them. They're not quite sure where this place called Aphek was. There's dispute about where it was. But the Israelites were encamped near Jezreel, which was in the northern part of the land. So they were quite some distance from home. That is important for the beginning of the next chapter of the events of what happened at Ziklag, which was in the south of the country, so some distance away. And David seems to have been quite willing to be at the back of the army. Maybe he positioned himself at the back of the army in order that when the main battle was joined, he and his men would not get very involved in it. But I believe that God intervened here. God did not want David there when Saul died and Jonathan died. He did not want him to be part of the enemy against Saul. We remember in all those movings around and chasings and so on, David never fought Saul, never stood and had even a minor skirmish. He always ran away to avoid fighting his own people and his own king. But he seems to have offered to and been willing to, and King Achish seems to have been willing to have him and trust him. But his men, his commanders, said, "We can't have him come. Look, listen, remember what they say about him." Maybe as they were journeying to this camping site, they had heard people singing this little refrain and dancing. Saul has slain his thousands, and David his 10,000s. And who had David slain? I was going to say slawn, but it's not slain. Slain. Who had he killed but the Philistines and the enemies of Israel? He'd never lifted his hand against any of his own people. And they didn't trust him. And they said to Achish, "Please, we can't go into battle confidently with him at the back. He might attack us from the rear. He's at the back of the army. He might attack us. How can we trust him?" And so Achish says to David, "As the Lord lives, you have been honest." This is verse 6. "And to me it seems right that you should march out and with me in the campaign. Nevertheless, the Lords do not approve of you, so go back now." So David does. He goes back and he does not enter into this battle, which we know was to be Saul's last battle. So David turns round and begins the long march home. And the Philistines went up to Jezreel from where they were camped at Aphek. And I believe God intervened here, intervened by stirring up the anxieties of the commanders and reminding them of what a powerful enemy David had been, so that not sufficient for them to turn on him and fight him, but enough for them to cause him to go home. And I think this is God. And interestingly, God using the hearts and minds of an unsaved group of people. And this is one of the marvellous things about God, that even when we don't know that he's doing anything, he is working in the hearts and minds of people around all of us to guide us without our even realizing it, to make sure that we don't end up where we shouldn't end up, and we don't get involved in things that we shouldn't get involved in. It can be all sorts of things. He may act on our behalf to open the way for a particular job, one that we don't particularly want, perhaps. I think it happened in my life when I first moved down here to Chard. There were no there were 2 hospital chaplaincy jobs available when I married Terry, but the hospitals were trying to save money and they didn't recruit anyone to those posts, and I had no job, and I had to take a job. I went to a job seekers weekly meeting to look for a job, and ended up working at one of the doctor's surgeries in Chard for 6 years. Not my favourite job, not a job I was particularly suited to, but it was the job God opened out for me, and boy did things happen in that job that were very important for me. But I would not have been in that job if it hadn't opened up for me quite miraculously, and actually against the thoughts of the lady who was running the surgery at the time. I remember being interviewed and she said to me, "This is not your kind of job. You were a chaplain. You were a visitor, a pastoral, a listener. Here is a job you're going to do which is being besieged by phone calls morning, noon and night, having lots of errands to run, lots of things that have to be done all at once. And it's a completely different kind of job to the one you're doing, and I don't think you'll stick at it." And I'm rather glad she said that, because it was like a red rag to a bull. I thought, she doesn't think I can stick at it? I jolly well, if she gives it to me, I will. I will do it to the best of my ability. I will. And I did. For 6 years, I did. That's a long story. But anyway, I believe God gave me that job. Specifically that job. Because there were lots of repercussions from that experience that are still continuing even today. And it was not something I chose, not something I was looking for, not something I was hankering after. It was something that God opened up miraculously for me. And I thank him for it. And he does that, you see, he does that. Even when we don't know where we're supposed to be and we don't know what we're supposed to be doing, if we are committed to him, he will find a way to open up opportunities and positions and situations for us, using people who have no particular faith in him, people who are not Christians. He still manages to get them on his side, as it were, to bring about his will. It is quite amazing. But this is what he did with David, to keep David away from the battle and to get him to go home to Ziklag, which he did. Now read the next chapter, chapter 30, during today if you can. Try and read it in at least 2 translations. It is, for me, one of my absolute favourite chapters of the Bible. Have a read of it and see if you can work out why before I start my thoughts for the day on it tomorrow. God bless you. Have a great day. See you tomorrow. Bye-bye.